The number of times this happens and the amount of time this wastes really adds up. So, if this happens between you and I personally, and I send you a link to this as a reply, please don't take it the wrong way. This simply comes from years of knowing what allows remote teams to operate with extreme efficiency. BLUF is at the heart of this. BLUF is an acronym that stands for bottom line upfront, that's typically only enforced in military communication to enforce speed and clarity in communication. The basic premise is simple. Put the most important details first. Do not tease or delay your main point because people are busy and their time is valuable. And make it clear, life or death decisions could be made using your information. While the decisions you make may not seem or be as life or death as those the military makes, in your work with us, you're spending time communicating with people who are busy, whose time is valuable, and who deserve the same level of consideration. That's why BLUF is such an incredibly useful model. Whether you're writing content, writing messages in Slack, Asana, or elsewhere, or emails to coworkers or customers, BLUF can help you cut through the noise and connect. BLUF is more than just a communications tactic, and it's much more than just finding the bottom line of your message and sticking it at the top of what you're writing. It's a way that, if consistently applied throughout your writing, helps organize thoughts and understanding the narrative that lets you present the information to your reader as quickly as possible. It's a shift in how you arrange thoughts, not a quick and dirty change. Number 1, include all the context your reader needs to act. Whether you're asking for help or sending something over for review, BLUF your communications with your coworkers to reduce the amount of work your recipient has to do to help you. You should always be aiming to reduce the overall amount of context switching necessary to help you. Remember that all messaging, regardless of the medium, is fundamentally distracting if you're writing, programming, in meetings, or doing anything other than messaging. As such, here's a good example of what not to do. Message number 1, hey, with a second follow-up right after saying, I have a question. This is quite frankly the worst of the worst. Why? Simply put, this forces a context switch with no immediate resolution. Now, the recipient has to read your message, type, sure, what's your question, and once again, wait for your response before they can help you. Beyond that, it triggers 2 notifications for no real reason at all. This may sound obvious, but often becomes natural in organizations. Add up dozens of instances of this throughout a single workday, plus the time lost getting in and out of a flow state. Communicating like this becomes a considerable time sink. And that doesn't even begin to consider the effects it has on globally distributed teams like ours that work across different time zones. A slight improvement you should equally avoid is where you offer slightly more context, but still not enough for it to be an actionable request for your recipient. Hey, quick question. Do you know of any good examples of thought leadership articles we've done? This time, at least there's an actual question embedded in the very first message, but it's too general to answer. It demands more context in order to get a proper answer. Instead, give as much context as you can in the very first message. Hey, quick question. Do you know of any good examples of thought leadership articles we've done? I'm putting together a proposal for X, and the CEO wants to see some examples before signing on. This kind of ask gives the recipient enough information that they can fully address your need and help you without having to exchange multiple messages, looking for context, or guessing why you're asking. It gives a clear what, examples of thought leadership, and a clear why, putting together a proposal for a specific company, that together let the recipient infer more or less the asker's exact need. By thinking about BLUF when we communicate internally, we put our concluding thought, often our ask, at the beginning. Number 2, make your ask and your tone clear. Email was one of the original contexts in which BLUF was first imagined. So let's go through some examples. For most of the emails we send, BLUF really is very simple to apply. Begin with the ask, give supporting details and context after that. That way, your recipient doesn't have to scan your email up and down looking for exactly what they have to do. The first few sentences of any customer email should clearly explain the purpose and reason for the email, as well as our desired or intended next steps. But not all communication, especially with clients, is so transactional. Sometimes we need to do more than just convey a request. Sometimes we need to convey our excitement or a sense of urgency. In these cases, you still want to BLUF and make the purpose of your email clear. Giving your email an emotional edge doesn't mean putting extra processing time between your recipient and the point of your email. But you also want to use one of the central principles behind BLUF, that information higher up in the visual hierarchy is also more likely to be understood and retained to effectively get across the emotion you want to convey. Let's take a look at this example, a somewhat adapted version of what we may send to a new customer at ScaleMath. After some confusion around the first article we produced for them, our main goal was demonstrating a sense of urgency about making things right and getting back on track as fast as possible. So after the first line, the BLUF, we explain our reasoning for the email in a way that makes the urgency as clear as possible. It's a natural human tendency when there's any kind of problem to try to tiptoe around it, let alone not approach it at all. Over email, this kind of approach doesn't convey what you want it to. It creates convoluted communication. You have to actively resist that impulse and attack problems head on using BLUF, if you want to pitch solutions to problems rather than wallowing in them. In the final draft, we begin from the assumption that there is room for improvement, as there always is, and use the first few precious sentences to make it abundantly clear that we want to and are here to fix it. Most importantly, we also demonstrate that we have a vision for what the desired outcome of fixing it looks like. Number 3, revise until your thinking is off the page. Generally speaking, all content is produced and published with the aim of helping people. People who are often busy with millions of other things, picking away their attention and time throughout their day. That's why one of our core principles is not just to write something useful. Your content needs to communicate efficiently with readers. Therefore, you should apply BLUF to your content marketing the same way you do to internal and external communications. Organize your writing so that it delivers context and meaning to readers as quickly as possible. Here's an example of an introduction to an article discussing SaaS homepage language that aims to lay out a concept for why clear language is important to any great homepage. Why clear language is the secret to a great homepage. Your homepage serves as the welcome mat for your SaaS business. Its clarity can make the difference between taking a new user through your sign-up process to conversion or having them abandon your site never to come back. In 2 sentences, this introduction fulfills its purpose. Here's another example of an introduction that contains more words, appears to say more, and may seem more detailed, but in reality, doesn't really convey a clear point at all. Why clear language is the secret to a great homepage. By keeping your language and design clear and concise for all users, whether they are new or not, you can make sure that everyone understands the core value of your product. By choosing simple language to describe your product, you will be able to communicate with everyone, whether they totally understand your field or are novices just looking for the best product for their business. Instead, the additions convolute the message. It draws a distinction between new and non-new users for no apparent reasons, mixes language and design, and fails to draw any conclusion as to why clear language is as important as we all know it is. It makes the point of communicate with everyone, but that's largely just synonymous with the idea of clear language itself. The main difference between the 2 introductions is very simple. One was written by a writer who knew exactly what the article was going to contain, and one was written by a writer who didn't. When you know the main point you're going to make, you can come right out and start talking about it from the beginning. When you don't, you have to resort to making general points that live in approximately the same thought space as your main point. Let's take a look at 2 article introductions as additional examples. Founders are notoriously hardworking. Some would call themselves resilient, and others would say they're highly motivated. I meet new founders every week, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to describe them. They're all different, but there's a common thread in the way they overcome problems and keep their teams motivated. I finally come up with a phrase to describe them: relentlessly resourceful. Now, compare that to a couple of days ago, I finally got being a good startup founder down to 2 words: relentlessly resourceful. The first introduction proceeds the way many of our first drafts do. After some throat clearing, it eventually gets to the point. Who knows if the reader would still be interested? Whereas the second introduction is the actual introduction to Paul Graham's article, Relentlessly Resourceful. It begins with the main point that he's trying to make. A couple of days ago, I finally got being a good startup founder down to 2 words: relentlessly resourceful. Graham goes on to explain how he reached that conclusion and what its implications are for founders. But the weight of the piece sits in the first sentence. The first version forces the reader to concentrate, so they're able to follow along with the writer's thought process. Many first drafts do this because the first draft is where we write to figure out what we know. When you are revising your drafts, one of your biggest priorities should be finding places where evidence of your own research process and thinking persists. You want your writing to communicate with maximum efficiency to its reader, not to reveal the exact journey you took to reach your conclusions, including every misstep. This is exactly what makes writing feel polished and complete. Last but not least, I want to end on an important note here: fake and concept writing versus real-world writing. Most people develop the lack of awareness for this throughout traditional schooling. After all, it's no surprise when you're used to writing for professors, parents, friends, or virtually anyone who is obligated to read your writing. Naturally, you easily forget that in the real world, you need to put in the work to earn your reader's attention. And putting in the work means including all necessary context, getting to the point, and revising until only the evidence of your thought process that you actually want your reader to see remains. Between colleagues and customers, this attention to detail leads to better communication and better work. Above everything, a better understanding. As for the content we produce as a part of the work that we do for our industry-leading clients and ourselves, that'll be reflected in people sticking around and more people coming to read your content. The Pyramid Principle is a great read in which Barbara Minto communicates how investing your time to make your communication as clear and efficient as possible is important because founders and C-suite executives are extremely busy people. In some ways, a seemingly simple change to the way you approach writing content is assuming our own readers are equally as busy as we are. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe on YouTube or your platform of choice, and I hope to see you in the next one.